Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about a mindset that I got from Steve Jobs that literally landed me in, I would say, arguably, it was the reason I got to 50K per month, just from this one sort of way of thinking. I got it from Steve Jobs. He was the one who sort of brought the whole thing together for me. A lot of you that are in sort of production right now are seeing that the old way of business is just not working maybe as good as it once used to. There's a new way of doing things. And I really can distill it down to this. And I mean, I was doing this 10 years ago, and I still believe that this today is the number one thing that is going to get you seen more. It's going to get you trusted more. It's going to get you way more repeated clients. It's going to get you higher budgets. It's going to get your client results, and you're going to have a much more healthier, happy business, which will then trickle into your families and everything else in between. And what I call it is strategy meets creativity. Now, it's the one mindset shift from Steve Jobs is what skyrocketed and pushed my video business to 50K months consistently. And it was really a way of sort of thinking about my offer. But let me first tell you where I got it from first. So from my first paid project to Two Wolves 40 Me. Now, what I mean by that is there was two things in my mind that was constantly sort of scaring me. And it was this idea of being creative or a pure artist versus having to run a business and be an entrepreneur, right? So I had to think about getting lead gen and getting sales and making sure I'm packaging and pricing and making sure that my books are up to date and that my accounts are. And then there was this sort of like what I would call with the entrepreneurial side. And I think a lot of creatives go through this, but you haven't really heard it being super defined. And this is where it led me to a better offer. Then there's the sort of purist, the artist. You know, this is your color grading, your psychology, the way you move the camera, your style, your taste, how you sort of see storytelling in general. And that was, for me, was like humanizing. And again, there's this other side. Now, I categorize these two things like in my mind as two wolves. And it's like what happened for me is that I never had a strong balance in terms of which one to focus on, and it never felt like it was truly balanced. And what I mean by that is that if I fed a wolf, like for instance, if I fed my entrepreneurial wolf, that would lead me down a road where that wolf would get bigger, scarier, meaner, and stronger, and would start to tear apart the artist wolf. Now, if I spent too much time with the artist wolf and fed that one, then it would tear apart the entrepreneurial. So I would be saying things to myself like the purist artist in me would be like, we can't charge for that. We don't charge for that. Like, it's not about money. It's about meaning. It's about legendary. It's about being, it's about impact. It's about getting story across. It's really a romanticizing about the feeling of story. Then the other side of me, if I felt that, it'd be like, that shit's, too woo-foo, too wishy-washy, it's not making money, it's not driving a result, etc., etc. So what I learned was the best way to deal with these two wolves in my mind was to make them friends and for them to start to learn to work together. And that's where this sort of idea of strategy meets creativity. It was almost like the two wolves inside my mind I had started to formulate, because at first when I started to develop this concept, it was because of me. It was not because of me this is how I found the offer that led me to sort of 50K months, but it didn't happen like this. Like, it happened to me, meaning I was focusing too much on the romance of storytelling, and then I would neglect the business side, and then I would find myself as a starving artist, or I would go too far into the entrepreneurial side of stuff, and I would sacrifice the quality because now I need speed and I need to pump it out. I need to pump it out. It's a product. It's like a conveyor belt. Let's get it out. And what I found was when I realized that these two things have to be together and not separate, not putting an importance over one wolf over the other, but making these wolves come together so that they actually work in harmony, is when things started to really become a lot more clearer for me. And today what I want to talk about is just, how I sort of did that and potentially how you can look at that, but mainly so like how can you work with clients, because the landscape of video businesses and how we conduct like projects now is like completely and utterly like shifted. The old way of doing this is no longer working. There's a new way, and obviously AI is creating a lot of disruption in our business with now likes of Sora 2, and we're probably all going to start going through we're probably all going to have to start going to therapy soon. The amount of time and energy and shit we've put into like cameras, and now you're saying that we can prompt it and it's going to create a $500,000 shot, and anybody in the back streets of Bangladesh can do it. It's like all that work, all that movement, all that understanding of psychology and story and the science, and it's a bit heartbreaking. And so we've got to try to come back to the drawing table and think to ourselves, like, how can we create more value, right? And this comes into play right now. This is probably one of the biggest things that you can do as a creative, is to lean into this sort of what I call creativity meets strategy, because I believe that the creativeness of what you do is fantastic, but if nobody sees that creative, then what's the point? No one sees it. Right? So no matter how much you can be romanticizing about it, and how much the perfect lighting needs to be and how great the story needs to be and everything else in between, if no one sees it, then what's the point? Because we need the right people. It's not even about if no one sees it. It's about the right people seeing it at the right time. That's the other thing. And that is me now tapping into my entrepreneurial wolf. So strategy without creativity. So if we take creativity without strategy, no one sees it. But strategy, let's say everybody sees it and all the right people sees it. Without the creativity, then you're sacrificing conversion, what's going to happen next, how much the audience is moved, how much that person is moved, how believable it's moved. I mean, the number one thing that you guys should be selling to brands right now is trust, because we are all about to go through a trust deficit. That's like the number one thing that I would be banging on about. If I had my agency again today, that's what number thing I'd be charging at. And for some of you that do know, I do some private work on the side with clients, and I'm telling you, the brands that I'm still in contact with, this is all I'm talking about, is we need to build trust around your personal brand, because without trust, you've got nothing. And we're about to go through a massive trust deficit. So what I would be doing if I was in your shoes as a storyteller is I would be leaning into these two components. I would be leaning into creativity and strategy. Hence the two wolves that fought against me for so many years about like, which one do I lean into the most, until I realized they both need to work together. It was becoming almost like impossible. I would become too sort of strategic and too much of an entrepreneur, where I would sacrifice the creativity and I'd let things go, and I wouldn't spend as much time on the sound. And then when I leaned into the storytelling side of stuff and went ultra romantic and lighting and story and science and the feeling and everything else, that would sacrifice this side of it. So creativity without strategy, no reach, no ROI. If no one sees or understands your brand stories, they die in silence. Brand, but strategy without creativity, no emotional pull. So there's no feeling of connection, right? They don't see themselves in the story, nor does the strategy itself from the creativity point of view get them to whatever the next step is. So no conversion. Attention to a brand without substance is just wasted spend. So one night, a client asked for more videos, cheaper, faster. I stared at the brief and realized I've become an expensive creative technician. And this is when it started to really hit me, when people were asking me for more sort of camera work. Can you stand in a corner, Michael, and capture my event? That was, I don't know if you get offended by that, but me, like, I get fucking very, very offended by it. Because I feel like I'm more than that, and I feel like I can tell a better story than that. And I've never once said, anytime anyone's like asked me for a show reel because they're speaking on stage, the last thing I want to know is they're like, them speaking on stage. I don't mind capturing shots of them walking up to stage in moments, that's going to add some value to the story. But ultimately, like, I'm not the type of person that wants to stand in the back of a corner and just record a workshop or record a presentation or just do what I'm being told to do without me bringing any sort of creative intelligence to the table. I just not interested in that type of work. So I asked myself, am I an artist hiding from sales or a person hiding from soul? Either way, I was hiding. I went back to the first principle, studied the greats, and kept coming back to one name, Steve Jobs. Jobs didn't pick a side. He fused taste with traction, design with distribution, story with system, strategy with creativity. And he was my absolute ultimate, you know, inspiration at the time. I read his biography, and how he made the phone super simple. He made it so it was artsy. It had a look. It had an aesthetic. I mean, if he was still alive today, I'd still believe that we'd be in much more ahead of where we're at, regardless of your opinion of the iPhone. But he created an ecosystem that we all sort of married, and we all got very close to, and the design and the way it worked and the way it felt simple. It was all minimalistic. It still had this sort of beautiful sort of look and feel to it, yet the system and strategy all underneath that was fantastic. And if you look at even just his marketing, like Here's to the Crazy Ones, that was him bringing the essence of the romance of storytelling into a major play of strategy, using creativity as his draw card to sell more stuff, more phones, more iPads, more Mac. He created that and used story, but he built the strategy into it. So balancing it isn't just splitting things 50-50, it's about having harmony. Creativity sets the vision, strategy ensures it hits the right audience. I stopped selling edits like a creative technician, and I started directing outcomes as a brand story creator. After I made this pivot, I then built a system developed from my creative methodology, which really was about me sort of breaking down the different phases of what I can do for clients. So it was me thinking in terms of strategy. So I always break it down to like awareness, consideration, conversion, right? So it's like, if someone comes into the brand from a strategic point of view, and this should somewhat start to give you some ideas around how you can create offers, and then you sort of infuse AI on top of that, and you really do have a recipe for success. Like, especially if you bring in the creativity side and you have taste and style, meaning you have a genre, you have a certain theme, the way you create stuff. For me, it was like, some of you will do humor, some of you will do action, like Red Bull, all that type of stuff. For me, it was more around like humanizing sort of 3-minute documentaries around a why or fight or contribution that the brand was trying to create that emotional connection. I would humanize the brand so they would see them, so the prospects could see themselves in the actual story itself. I feel like that's the ultimate form of connection in terms of when it becomes a true connection. The viewer sees themselves in the story. It's like the reason why we watch movies or we watch music and et cetera, right? So I broke my offer into these 3 phases. Like, I thought to myself, well, there's consideration, there's conversion, but there's awareness. Awareness would be top of the funnel, consider would be middle of the funnel, and then the ending would be conversion would be the bottom of the funnel, so to speak. And that would be considered me mapping out the strategy of like, how can I take a brand and help them with visual assets at certain points by using the power and the romance of storytelling to emotionally pull them in to take the next step, which would typically be either sign up to a newsletter or pick up the phone and call. Like back in the day when I was working with brands, that was really the 2 major things. Or it was a frame video, like framing the sales call, which some internet marketers call a VSL. I would call it a cinematic sales letter or a cinematic sort of piece where they would see that and it would frame their sales department ready for a sales call. Okay. But I would always think to myself in terms of the wolf of strategy would have to come out, because I need to map out where is the best placement for these particular creatives. So phase 1, I did brand story and impact. Phase 2, I did ad strategy and rollout. So this was about awareness. And then phase 3 was more about clout building and nurturing, and more about keeping clients for retention. And also for people that were sitting in the gray area, I would create long form content so that they could push that out in a newsletter or something like that would help bring them clients back through offering up good quality content or storytelling, as to speak. But again, it was all mapped out in a visual sort of strategy with story together. So again, strategy meets creativity. So each with a clear deliberates compounding the results. When I led strategy and creativity in harmony, my close rate doubled, my budgets expanded, and what's your rate questions became how fast can we get started? And that was the key. That is the actual key. When you start having conversations around creativity versus strategy, the whole level of the conversation with the brand completely changed, because now you're sort of starting to eat off the agency play, because this is how they talk. And this is what I found. It was naturally a thing that just came about by me having my own internal, and a lot of the solutions that you guys go through while you're watching this, just tip for tip. Any problem that you're going through in business, typically, if you can master that thing and you can learn it, that's how you're going to build better products. Because if you go through the problem, they go through the problem. And so the way I seen it, it was like I was internally going through this problem of like, I don't know whether to be an entrepreneur or be a creative. And that's why Clout is dedicated to transforming, because we work better with people that are highly creative. Taking a creative and then transforming them into a creative entrepreneur, because the offer is mainly that. It is strategy meets creativity. Fuck, I hope this makes sense. If I had to rebuild this system today, I'd inbuilt AI into every step of the process, and there's no end to what you can do now with nurturing, voice, literally messaging, storytelling. Like, when it comes to this stuff, the problem with AI at the moment is that nobody is considered an expert because it's all very new, okay? So not as a replacement, but as a catalyst. In a world where AI can do 80%, the top 1% will belong to those who own the 20% that matters, okay? Very cliche statement, but very, very true. Story, strategy, and the ability to give creative direction. If you find yourself wondering which side is in control of your business, look at the part of your business that's getting avoided. And this is key. If you're really, really known for creativity and you're really, really doing well, and your client typically, takes you the best way to look at what's being avoided is are you getting repeat clients? If you're getting repeat clients, it means you pretty much nailed creativity and strategy quite well. Or you've worked with an ad agency and they need the creativity side. Because most agencies, like ad agencies, they look for us for the creativity side of it. They're looking for 50%. They don't have that part down. They have the strategy mapped out, and that's how you fall into this human tripod thing, because they're going to tell you what exactly to do. But if you can take that control and say, no, I can do the strategy and I can do the creative direction. These two things meet together, it just explodes the business. But where you can find where you're avoiding pricing and sales, creativity is starving strategy. Shipping volume with no pride, strategy is starving creativity. Build the balance or fall behind. So on my closing note of this video, and I know I feel like I've been speaking in riddles, and I just hope there's one person watching this that actually understands this concept, because if you get this and you truly master this part of you, or if you truly master this in your offer, where you can create a certain, and this really works well with the 3S model that I talk about, specific person to a specific problem to a specific creative solution. This is where you can start to dissect the strategy that your genre, your taste, your style, your type of content that you create, because all of you watching this have different. Some of you do, because I look at all your work. For those of you that do comment and people that do reach out to me, and we speak to about 400 or 500 filmmakers per day across Instagram, LinkedIn, and our newsletter, right? We speak to a lot of filmmakers, and all of you have different genres, right? And you pretty much, most of my audience have nailed the creativity side of it. So what you want to do is you want to start looking into your type of creativity that best suits a strategy. So for instance, if you're really good at animation and 3D design, a really good strategy is to go to tech companies and offer them 5th grade explainer videos, because they have complex solutions that they need to explain to their market because it's so complex they don't know how to explain it. But your creativity would suit that strategy, because when it comes to conversion, meaning awareness, consideration, so first somebody's made aware, then they're made considerate, then consideration, and then conversion. You could take your creativity, your animation skills, 3D, like really good 3D and high level, take it to tech companies and say, listen, I know you've got a complex solution. I can see you've not got a video on there. I could create a 60-second animation piece that would explain exactly what you do in the most simplest childlike way so that your conversions skyrocket. I then could cut off 3 or 4 pieces to run some ads to bring awareness to it. And I could also do a deeper sort of documentary or brand story on the About Me page so people understand the essence of who you are. That is a really good point in where creativity meets strategy. Okay? So I hope you like this video. If you're not liked and subscribed, do it. I'm trying to make these very raw, these videos, where I'm not scripting them. I'm just literally talking to a friend and just letting you know my thoughts. And hopefully some of you are actually getting this and it's creating some value, because I can tell you now, when I started doing this, my whole offer completely changed. I not only did 50K, I did a lot more than that. Every conversation was never about how much is your day rate. I never got asked that question. You know, the amount of creative people that I see and I look at your work and I'm like, fuck, you're so good at what you do. How are you getting asked how much your day rate is when you're that good? And a lot of it is just down to the fact that you're leaving all the strategy to either the brand or you're leaving it to the agency. Something to think about.